So now we're being recorded. So last week, the topic's the same as this week. We're just going to continue with it, which is chapter 10, the function of the brain. And with the function of the brain, there were a few topics that we covered, which one is that what Walter states is that the brain is a complex set of motion expressed by waves of light pulsing in cycles, and that machines cannot know. They can only project thoughts, but they have no knowledge. And the third item was desire. Desire is not in the brain. So basically, let's just recap Walter's ideas of where he has different words he uses. He has mind, he has thinking, he has imagining, he has knowing. And basically the way it works is that from source or God, there is a pulse that is put out. Now that pulse that is put out is the mind of God. So the mind of God comes out into the Akasha, ether, whatever you want to call it, as two sext lights, two separate. So it from one single thought, it splits into two lights, like the yin and the yang. And then we receive those thoughts. We receive the mind of God into what I was saying last week was our pineal gland. If we look at the diagram here, we talked a little bit about how if you took a cross section of the brain and also looked at the symbol for the eye of Ra, how that thalamus and the hypothalamus.
Did you say high of Ra?
Eye of Ra, which is
Ra, like R-A?
like R-A, yes, like Ra,
Good.
like.
Got you.
So that right down here, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, is the eye of Ra from Egypt, from Osiris and Horus and that lineage. That the eye was actually showing the dot here that is in the thalamus. The little kind of thing that came off the bottom was actually representation of the pineal gland, and the area over here was actually a representation of the hypothalamus, with the eyebrow being this light brown portion below the area of C of 6.
You said eyebrow?
Yeah, this eyebrow. See this eyebrow right here?
Oh, that. I'm sorry. You moved the mouse up there. I thought you meant that.
Well, that's what this light brown area represents. So it's
and how is that? How is that the eyebrow, the thing up on top?
Because it's just above the. If you look, it's above the thalamus gland here.
But isn't you don't mean this eyebrow here?
No, this eyebrow that's shown in the symbol of the eye of Ra.
Very good. Sorry.
Okay.
Got you.
That's good. Okay. So we were talking about that because there was two, as we were saying, there is the mind of God, there is knowing, there is thinking, there is thought, there is idea. So Walter Russel uses a lot of these words, sometimes interchangeably, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to follow what he's saying. So with that, as we look at the brain, what Walter Russell's saying is that there's a knowing. And that knowing is coming in through what I would say is the pineal gland, because the rest of the body, Walter Russell says, is a electric sensing device, just like a computer. And as we talked last week, we went over the memory hierarchy pyramid of a computer. And we talked a lot about what the CPU was and how that all worked. And then we also discussed some other things. We talked about Swedenborg and some of his concepts. And so now we're going to move on with the next question. And one thing that Walter Russell did say was that computers do not have desire. And he said that desire is not in the brain, it is a centering conscious self. So what he's saying is that computers don't have desires. They don't have that emotion, that force that comes from source that causes us to want to create and wants us to move forward and to become one and to manifest in the physical. So through that desire, through knowing, through the mind of God, we then manifest in the physical world. What we get confused with is that when we have sensations from the physical world, those sensations form a kind of conditioning like a Pavlovian dog where he hears the bell and he eats. We think that's thinking, and it's not really. It's really conditioning of electric sensing. But we begin to believe that all that sensing that we have is our thinking, and we actually lose track of our thinking, and we become, as we said earlier, like a golem, which was, I think, the week before last, where we actually begin to we become mindless robots running in our subconscious mind, and eventually lose our soul. And so within this knowing is kind of this,
Lose it or connection to it?
we lose connection to it. It can be refound, but I mean, after time, it will slip away. We will lose all connection with it. Oftentimes, shamans will do ceremonies in which to retrieve the soul. If they think that someone has a soul sickness, if that is why they actually are experiencing some type of illness or dis-ease, it is a separation from the soul. It was kind of interesting. I was doing a lot of work with people this week at Music and Sky, and one person asked me about the jab. She asked, "Did I think you could recover from it once you had it?" And my answer was yes, I think you can. And she asked me, how did I think that would happen? And I said, I think if you have a spiritual awakening, as what Jung talks about, and also what is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous of how people can recover from alcoholism, because I actually think, and again, this is just me talking, that the reason that we get it in the first place, the reason that people get it is because they have a soul sickness. They've lost faith in source, and they are thinking from their sensing mind and have lost all hope of what actually they've lost sense of cause and only deal in effect. So unless they can actually rekindle that there is a cause, they will always dwell in effect. So that's what I would call a spiritual awakening, that they actually see there is more than just the physical body. And that was kind of just something that came to me as we were talking, because in order for people to even get what we're talking about right now, to understand about knowing, to understand about these items, they will have to have a spiritual awakening if they believe that there is nothing outside their physical sense. So with that being said, let's move on to, does anyone have anything to comment on what I just said?
Makes sense.
I had a comment, but I forgot it.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to number 5. So what is the servant of universal intelligence, and what is its function?
Where is this number 5 on the screen right in front of us?
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went to the next row down. Sorry.
The red, that's where we left off at.
Yeah,
So,
I was looking at the next one. Sorry.
Okay, so what is the servant of universal intelligence, and what is its function? From page 57, the brain. It acts as the central switchboard for all instinctive, voluntary, and involuntary action. Such messages are not mental. They are purely electrical. They produce sensation. So what we're saying here is that there is a universal intelligence and that its servant is the brain. And that the brain acts as this central switchboard. So as we were talking about, if we went back to the diagram I did a while ago here, where it shows cause here, from cause going to effect, and all of this is in the mind of God. As the wave goes out as a magnetic pulse, the two lights, and hits our brain becomes a switchboard. Our brain is an antenna, basically. You could use switchboard. I kind of prefer to say tuner, in which that is picked up and then transmuted into other channels which are electrical, which then can be split into the multiplicities of light and then into material, which is effect. So what Russell says is we get too caught up on effect and do not concentrate on God, on God's imagining, which is cause. So the question can be then, where do we actually reside? I mean, I say we, I mean our soul, our, who we are. Oftentimes we believe that we are this brain, and Walter Russell says, no, we're not this brain. This brain is just a switchboard. That, do we live in the pineal gland, or is the pineal gland just an antenna that these imaginings of God, the mind of God hits and then sends out these waves or these pulses to the universe? Today I was listening to someone, I'm going to go to Robert A. Bartlett's class on alchemy tomorrow. And I was listening to his lecture. And what he was saying is that light actually comes into the body and it absorbs what it needs, and then what it doesn't need, it shoots out into the universe. And so that all that kind of reminded me of this image here of the anatomy of the biofield, which this is the work of Eileen McCusick. And what Eileen does is she works with tuning forks. And what's kind of interesting is if you look at the top view of the brain here, and you actually look at the biofield, it's very similar to the shape of that brain.
Mm.
Now, with, let me zoom in here a bit.
Mm-hmm.
If I can, let's see here. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. I don't think I need to be that much in there. Okay, this is good. So as we look at this biofield here, it basically, as we've talked about earlier, see this biofield we have actually centering on the chakra of the sacral chakra, not actually on the heart. The heart's up here. So within the biofield that we've talked about, and with the brain that we've seen, is that what Eileen's found is, and I've done it also, is that when you strike a tuning fork, you can what they call comb the tuning fork at about 6 feet out from the body, actually 3 feet out from the body, and comb it in towards the center of the body. So this overall is about 6 feet wide, this overall biofield. And with that, the biofield on the left side is the feminine, and on the right side is the masculine. Now, this is a bit different than what we see in the brain. We usually see well, I guess this is looking at the person. So as we look at this right side here on the mother side, so if this is when you look at a person, not their right side and left side. So as I'm looking at the person, this right side is actually, when you look at them, would be their left side. So when you see the left side, you see the mother, and when you see the right side, you see the father. So within that, if we actually correspond that to the brain, which is again a bit different here because the left side is actually the right side of the brain, which is the left-hand side. So, this artistic side and so on, and this right side here is actually the analytical side for men because it goes opposite. So this left side is actually the right side of the brain, which would go into the left hand. All right. The left side. This should be left side would go into the right hand, and the left side would go into the is actually the right side, which would go into the left hand.
Okay.
Is that correct? So with this being said, if you have issues on your left-hand side, then you would have issues with your mother. And each of these lines that are put forth here would be, so if you have at the third eye chakra, if you have an issue with your mother, that would translate into worry about the future or fear. Right? And then if it's on the right hand side, it would be thinking about the past on your father's side.
Mhm.
So what she's saying is this is our biofield. And as you comb through here at these chakra levels, you will see the tuning fork change either in pitch. It will either go very high or very low. And that will be based on how far in on this biofield you go. So say if someone was 30 years old and you were halfway in and you got what she would say is a stickiness and also a pitch change, that would mean that something happened at 15 years of age that this is like the rings of a tree
Mm.
that caused you, if it was on your left-hand side, it would be your mother's side, and if it was on your right-hand side, it would be your father's side. So, but it would be different on this side. So thinking about the speaking and not being heard. So all of these line up, like say with the throat chakra and so on and so forth. So as we look at this diagram, we can actually see that what she's proposing, and again, that she's not the only one. There's quite a bit of people that talk about the human biofield. I mean, it's kind of like Rupert Sheldrake talks about when he talks about the morphic fields, that these are where our traumas reside. And that's why when I showed the picture of the computer here, I also said that that memories were stored in the hard drive except for traumas.
Mhm.
Some of the traumas may be stored outside the brain and actually in our biofield because they actually affect the soul. Again, I don't know that for sure, but that would make sense to me that maybe there are aspects of this biofield that we hold in the soul and that we carry with us when we die, to where a lot of the things in the brain would die with the brain since they are purely biological. So as we look at this biofield also, and I've done it, I've combed people's biofield and found issues and been pretty accurate. you can actually use the fork as you get better with it. You can actually just put your intention on it and strike the fork, put your intention. You can find out where the areas are. So that actually shows how the wave works, that you can actually just do it through intention and don't actually have to comb through once you get more skilled at it. So if the biofield's outside our body, is our essence, our soul, everything else outside the body? Some people say that our body is just, a meat suit that we animate. And where we animate it and how we animate it is questions that a lot of people have had for a long time. Walter Russell really doesn't get into it that much, but he does say that the brain does not animate the body, that the spirit does. Remove the spirit and you remove the life. So within that context, is the spirit outside the body? We know that oftentimes, because we have eyes, and that is one of our highest sensing organs that we have, that because we see everything, and because we see everything through the eye, we often think that we're behind the eyes, meaning that we're in the brain. Now with, I think his name is it, it's not Tom Cowan, the fellow who does all the remote viewing, he talks about how you have to get out from behind the eyes. So if we can do remote viewing, are we really in this area? Is our spirit, as also Walter Russell talked about in the first chapters, that we are omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. So if we're omnipresent, does that mean that we are actually outside of this body, and that this body is really just kind of like, it's almost like a hotspot for us, in which we have the passcode, right? We have the password to this unique hotspot. That is, it is sensing, it is receiving, it's receiving knowing from source, it's receiving sensing through the environment, and that all is all being fed back to us as we are out here somewhere. And so we are not really in this body, because what this body really is made for is to be that projection unit that we talked about. Because it is a unique signature to us. So it has our DNA, which is multi-generational. It has our traumas, everything about us. Because what Walter Russell said, and the number 2 item that he wanted us to know, the number 1 was that there is source, there is a knowing mind. And that number 2 is that everything's a projection, an illusion. So as we look at the brain, if this is not us, what is us? And if it's, why do we have it? If it's all about knowing, why did we come to a physical plane, if not to learn, but also to use this physical body as how we experience it and project it, which would mean that we would all have our own projections and may be very different from what everybody else sees, but it's unique to us. Any comments on that?
I was
Well,
going to say, oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Isaac. Okay.
Okay, so I was going to say, if we are not in our bodies, where are we, or where are our bodies?
Our bodies are, I would say, on the earth, or within,
Yeah, but where's that?
again, there is no space, there is no time, right? And there is no true dimension, there is no space or time. That's a construct that's made for us to examine the physicality, because everything is happening at once simultaneously, as with the Akasha. So our minds are actually in the Akasha, which is the Akasha, the ether, the collective consciousness. And we are resonating with a form that has been put forth through creation that we created. I mean, we've created a physical plane. So our bodies are here, and we've created that physical plane. We've chosen, this time within this reality to put this body here, but we're not in the body. We are still in this. This is kind of, it's almost like saying this is the video game, right? With the Matrix or whatever. This is an area that has been cordoned off as the physical plane for us to experience physical manifestation and sensation. But it is not, we are not the body and the reality that we put forth. And this is something that Walter Russell shared very early on, which was that there was the two items, and you weren't here for this, but this is in, I think it was chapter 1, I believe, that everything that we see is an illusion that is a projection on a cosmic screen, and that motion is fleeting, and that this is not, there is really no physical existence that we know. And we can create within the space, but it's not real. So where is your body? Where it's in a dimension that has been set forth by the mind of God to actually have the ability to sense in a 3D world. Why that is, I don't know. I mean, I guess, it could be that source or higher source wants to create something new and different, because within the spiritual realms, they may not have 3D matter as we know it. So that's a question I really don't know. Well, all I'm putting forth here is we have the brain and we have knowing, and we, do we reside outside the body? Based on the things I've talked about, remote viewing, biofield anatomy, and so on and so forth.
Well, I know that, when you go to sleep, we connect to source better, but our body still goes, because there's like two connections. There's the heart and the connection from to the source. So where is it? I mean, it's where our consciousness is. It's where we keep what we are at that level. So I don't think it's in this physical thing that we're looking at. It's in the more like in the etheric level, like higher up. And until it's our time to leave, this whole thing stays together. Like it's like there's like two streams, the one in the heart and the one coming from above. So and you were asking why like why are we, you were asking that question.
Yeah, I mean, I said I don't know,
I understand, but if you study consciousness and that you believe that everything is growing, like evolution, God came here to experience everything, and at the same time, there is higher realm to go. So he's growing like us, and until he's experienced a certain amount of thing and proven whatever it is, we're all participating in this, like we're an extension of it. So whatever we do with our free will and all that, we can add to that, and at the same time all grow together. So there's a reason why we're here, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what, as you look at the world, right? So, one of Walter's quotes was also that, can you know God? And the answer was no, but can you know his body? No, but you can see it, right? So this entire physical realm is the body of God, right? So you're seeing the body of God in the physical realm. So I just wanted to cover those aspects, because as we talk about the brain, I think, Walter doesn't really get into where does the soul reside, as I talked about that, within this diagram of the brain and the eye of Ra. Some were saying that, this area, the thalamus, is where the soul reside, within the pineal gland. And then, but at Earth and Sky, some people were talking about the brain stem, maybe where the soul resides. And I don't know if that's true or not either. I believe that the soul does not. My personal belief is the soul doesn't reside in the body at all.
Yeah.
That
it's all an extension.
It's all an extension, and
but it's resonate, like like it's going to keep it coherently there as it's resonating out. So it's got to be. Well, when we go into meditation, we go in stillness and we go higher. So it's not. I know these are there, but again, I think they're extensions for us to do what we're supposed to do, and get the knowing that we're supposed to have. And
like I said, the body's almost like a probe of our soul. It's probing the 3D, the physical environment.
It's a reflection. Okay, writing, they'll call it a reflection.
But as I started talking earlier, and I think Doug asked the question, I do think we can lose connection with our soul.
Oh.
And then our body just becomes a thinking mind. It just becomes a sensing, and we turn into a golem, basically. And
we just repeat recorded stuff. We just, you repeat what you've learned before. Like if you lose that connection.
I would say if you lose the connection too much, your body will just die, because.
Yes, you'll get atrophy and you'll get disease. And that was, again, where I'm going with a lot of this was in my response to when I was asked, do I think people can recover from the jab? And I said, yes, I think if they actually reconnect, that I think a lot of that has to do with the reasons of why they got it in the first place, why they think they need it and why they believe in it. And to me, it's almost a separation of soul, not anything else. And to actually to mitigate that, or to recover from that, if there are detrimental effects from it, then they would have to almost have a spiritual awakening and a reconnection to their soul.
I had that question. I discussed it with Philip. I mean, you probably met them at the Music in Sky. Philip and
who?
Philip and Crew, his wife.
Yes, we did meet them. Yes.
So we discussed those things at the quantum group that we're part of. They have a special a private quantum group. Anyway, we discussed that. And I actually asked him one time privately, and basically he said, if you have a really good connection with the source, there's no question that, it might affect you a bit, but not enough to lose that connection, for one thing. So himself and his wife had to travel outside the US, and they had to take the test, whatever. And anyway, it took them a couple of days, but they did recover very well. I'm just saying, there are ways to heal this, I guess. So.
Any more comments on what I just said about that before we move on? Isaac, do you have anything else to say?
I mean, I always have comments, but
comment away.
Good, it's all.
the way I see all of this is that there is source, and source emanates from whatever oneness. And within that big dream of source, there exists this physical world, and then source also makes little copies or little segmentations of itself, which are us, our individual consciousness. And those individual drops of the ocean then come and animate parts of this dream. But then also at some point, the dream is a little bit, you get tired of the dream, or source gets tired of the dream and withdraws itself back out into, I don't know, the oneness. That's when you're in deep sleep, as the yogis say. And you know that all of the reality is a part of this big dream. So yeah, I definitely agree that we aren't, like, we are this reality, but we're not really, or we're in this reality, but we're not really of it. Or yeah, so there's there.
And that's really what Jesus said when he said, "You can be in this world, but don't be of it."
Not this world. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that you're right, and I want to, I throw out these concepts, but I also want to stay with what our study group is, which is Walter Russell.
Yes.
And what he says is, that it's a constant, dance between gravitation and radiation. So as we, get into the gravitation, which is the condensing, it then turns and goes into the radiation, and the radiation is death, and the gravitation concentration is life. And then once we hit that, that's just the constant dance that goes on, or is the breath of what life is. So, he also talks about concentration and decentration. And what concentration is when we actually think about a thought, and we almost kind of manifest that thought. And then decentration is when we go into that 0 point where we have no thought. And we vacillate between those things. And within the vacillation of gravitation and radiation, we have motion and wave. And same thing with decentration and concentration. So within that, we have these different diagrams of the motion is in the spiral, which I believe this diagram shows. Come on. Let's go. I don't want to grow. There we go. So within this, we can see that this is a constant spiral that is centrifugal and centrifugal. So as we move forward into the center, this would be the gravitation or concentration into the center, and it's constantly charging and generating and discharging as we get to this center point. And then that actually flows into the other side here, where see how it's going in and coming out, discharging and charging, and so on and so forth. So this is what you were talking about, Isaac, as you said he gets tired of it or whatever. It's really just the cycle of the charge and discharge of the radiation and gravitation, that, and so far as that's what Russell says it is, that is the cycle of life and death. But at death, our bodies will die, our physical, our 3D will die, but our soul and our consciousness will live on and just move into a different existence. And then, if we are reincarnated back into the earth. So So with that being said, we also have some other diagrams here that we can talk about. Any discussion on the decentration and the gravitation and the discharge and recharge and that cycle of the diagram I had up here? Any comments on that?
Also, one thing I've been trying to grasp is, I guess there's only one substance, let's say, that's doing all of this
There's
expanding and contracting,
there's only
right?
only one what?
Substance, or like,
Well,
if you read the universal one, it says there's only ever one anything, like, and all of it is just disturbances or like out of balance of this one substance.
Well, what, again, what Walter Russell would say would be the light, right? That
Yes, the light.
It's light being condensed. As you go back to this diagram that I had here, and this is a diagram which starts off with this, black and white, yin yang, right? Cause the two, which then would come into our mind, right? Our projector, which is a red and blue. But when that light hits it, then it turns into it breaks up into qualities of light, which then goes and creates the physical universe, is what Russell was saying. Does that answer your question, or is that?
It's sort of, I'm sort of imagining this 0 point of nothingness of light that then expands into space. And I recall seeing something that as it expands into space, like in order for it to stay balanced, there's also a concentration that is perfectly balanced with the expansion. So like as space is created, then also matter is created to balance the space.
Correct.
And I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the spiral. And
when you're talking about the spiral, William, are we always thought, because we haven't mentioned that word yet, are we also talking about the torus, that everything's a torus?
Yes, the spiral really in 3D is the torus.
Isn't it?
So what Russell says is everything is really conical, starting at a point and then going out into, a larger space, which is the universe, and then coming back down into that point. And then, so you would have, and I think I showed it in one of my diagrams. I think we actually had it in, let me see if I have any, those diagrams with the man and the woman, which actually superimpose the cones over them. I believe it does. Let me see here a second, see if I can see this. Oh, no, I don't think I have it here.
Let me say something. I'm totally new here to this, and I'm looking at this going, is this at all related to the black hole idea?
It can be. The black hole, I thought we had this. The black hole, from what Walter Russell says, okay, so that's just the man and the woman. They don't, it shows, but you see the conical shape here. Can you guys see my screen with the man and the woman up on it now?
Not right now.
Let me see if I can share that. Okay, so let me stop.
Right now.
Let me stop that share. Let me share this. Let's see if I can. Okay, so Brian, we didn't get to introduce you, but I'm recording, so I didn't want to record your introduction. We'll do that next time you come on before the meeting.
Okay.
And Brian, I met at Music and Sky also.
Yeah.
So when we look at this, can you see this conical shape that's happening? See the spiral, Giselle?
Yeah.
So when you're looking in the 2D, version of it, you're just really looking down on it. But when you look, and so what this does is that what actually forms the torus. These two conical cones going to 0 point here and then reversing back out again. And in the center is where we have creation. But we could also take this cone and put it over the man and the woman. And if you remember in my video that I did, Giselle, showing the biological ionization, there's two cones also within the body, and one is alkaline and one is acidic. And those cones can go basically up and down, with the top half of the cone being acidic and the lower part of the cone being alkaline. So if I took this cone and put it at a 90-degree angle over the man and the woman,
Yeah.
this area right here would actually be at the belly button with cones going down and up. So when you say that what the torus, this whole thing would then create, I think that someone had posted on our website, on our Telegram group, kind of an animation
Oh, yeah.
that was showing how it formed the torus. Do you remember that? I think
Yeah, it was the yin and yang, like in 4D or 3D.
Yeah,
You know that
exactly. And that's really what this would
very
be.
beginning of the
if-
session.
If this was in motion, that's what you would see, would be the torus. So back to your question, Brian, about is this like black holes? Well, what Walter Russell says is that for every planet we see that's lit, there is also a complementary black hole,
Okay.
because that would be the radiation of the gravitation that we see. So it has to be balanced.
So it's sort of related. The same idea.
Mm-hmm.
We lost Isaac, I guess. He was on the phone, but
Oh,
No,
I don't-
he's still
Oh,
here.
I'm still here.
He's
I
still
don't
here.
know why I don't see the box for Isaac, but anyway, doesn't matter.
Well, I might have to expand it out. I don't know.
That's fine. I'm happy he's here.
I'm happy. As long as you're happy, that's all we care
I know,
about.
I just thought we dropped somebody. That's all.
I think that Doug is stuck.
Doug,
He's had the same picture up for a while.
his camera must be frozen. That's all.
So let me go back to our PowerPoint here. So, there's another diagram here that we can look at also, which is basically the same type of thing. It's too big. So, which is this diagram here, which
it's the same.
can you see my screen? No, I'm gonna have to stop that.
No, we're still at the man and woman right now.
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. We see you in big, Brian.
So here's this diagram here, right, which is the construction of the cycle. So again, we see the conical shape with the outside being larger going down into the center. And this area right here that we're talking about, so this would be the 0 point.
Okay.
And what Russell says is that say within a planet, this would actually be the rings of, like say the rings of Saturn, which are in radiation as that planet begins to wane. So
Age.
yeah, as to get to the other side of the cycle. So the planet would grow, get to a certain point, and then it would begin to dissipate to the center with the rings. So this mind and motion universe. So this is kind of a diagram of the mind and motion universe we've been talking about, with heat and cold all gravitating to the center. And then he also takes that and corresponds it below with color. So yellow being in the center, going out, to orange, red, violet, and to the edge, to red itself. And then, so this would be the red shift, blue shift that we're talking about. So red and blue are on the outside, with the yellow being in the center. And I think we were talking about this, Isaac, at Music and Sky, about how do we get green. And so we see where the green, and you were talking more within I think it's of a prism, where this would just be the pure colors of coming from the mind, with the axis in the center. And then he also, also corresponds table to this of periodic elements, right? With helium and lithium, carbon, and so on with these colors. So carbon's in the center, which is carbon, which we are carbon-based units, right? Yeah, which is in the center. And then he also corresponds that to the musical notes of the scale. Any comments on what I just shared? That this one's a pretty tough one, you know, but it's very, you know, where he calls this the magnetic white light, right? The magnetic white light. And this you know, he says that we mistake magnetism as a force when it's really electric. That the magnetism comes forth from God, and so it's electromagnetism that we're looking at.
That one I definitely have trouble wrapping my head around, although I've definitely recognized there's something inconsistent with Maxwell's equations and the fact there's no magnetic monopoles. Like it just doesn't feel balanced. So something about that theory always felt out of balance to me.
And within his book, I think the new concept of the universe, he actually really explores that with Maxwell's theories and his equations.
Hey.
All right. So did we ever get to question 2 yet?
Well, we had to recap, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
It helps. There's so much to learn.
Well, I think, you know, that was some pretty big discussion. So that was all just question 5. We've kind of, you know, talked about sensation and, you know, the brain. It is essential for all instinctive, voluntary and involuntary action. Such messages are not mental, they are purely electrical. They produce sensation. Number 6, when does man actually think? So from page 58 to 59, and I didn't really talk to Brian and Isaac about this, but what I do is I will take lines out of the book, The Secret of Light, and then create a question from them. And then I'll put in the page number where I found it, and then actually put what is, you know, just pretty much verbatim what is in the book. So on page 58, 59, it says, when electrical sensations act in unison with his conscious awareness of light, which centers him in person, he can then recognize cause in the spirit back of the effect which his senses record. Until that transformation takes place, man is without knowledge, no matter what extent his senses may have informed him. So with that, this gets back, and this is why I created this diagram. And I'm going to share this now. Let's see here, stop sharing. Share. Back to this. Can everyone see this diagram now? The diagram of the
Yes, now we do. Yep.
So
Okay.
that's why I created this diagram, because over here we have cause, right, which is the mind of God. This goes through iterations to get to effect, which is matter. So this right here, this 2-6 light, is a magnetic pulse, and I think in one of the earlier videos I compared it to throwing a pebble into an ocean or into a pond, say, and then that pulse would ripple out and then hit us. You know, it would come in contact with man, probably at the pineal gland level, which would then begin to correspond into qualities, not quantities, and qualities are different. But the qualities then form these different lights that we saw in the other diagram, which we just looked at, where it showed the different variations from blue to red, with yellow being in the center, just like this prism here. which then becomes an electric wave, which then go out, creates effect, which is 3D reality.
Mm.
So if we go back to, can you now see the same thing? Can you now see the questions up?
Hmm.
Well,
Everybody?
I've seen the
Yeah.
questions, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when we look at the question again, when does man actually think? It's when electrical sensations act in unison with his conscious awareness of light, which centers him in person. He can then recognize cause in the spirit back of the effect which his senses record. So if you remember that diagram, how we are going from the cause, which is the mind of God, all the way out through self, through that we recognize that cause in the spirit back of the effect which our senses record. Until that transformation takes place, man is without knowledge, no matter what extent his senses may have informed him. So this gets
Sounds like not many of us are actually thinking.
Amen, brother. Amen. Hallelujah. I think you're correct. I really do think you're correct, Isaac.
And the yogis say that all of our like mental processes are a part of the illusion, and some of them are worse than others, but eventually you have to get rid of all of them if you really want to be present.
Correct. And, you know, in last week's video, that was the thing that I really wanted to stress, was that the definition of knowing is being changed right now.
Oh, God,
And
yes, you said that.
the definition of thinking is being changed. And it's being changed that the AI is knowing, you know, the artificial intelligence is knowing and thinking. And we are being, and so what happens is we're being caught in a constant state of flight, fright, or, you know, whatever, totally involved with our instincts and our senses. And we don't have time to think truly with knowing and aligning ourselves with God and source. And for us to actually know, you know, it's about, as I think Giselle said, you know, learning rote, right? Just memorizing things, not thinking. You know, the TV becomes our mind, our brain, and we don't think, we just react. So yeah, I am total agreement that very few of us are actually thinking, per Walter Russell's definition.
I'd say that maybe us in this group have a little bit of thinking that's seeping through, but most of it, we're still, most of the processes that are occurring are still the AI, maybe.
Yes, and that's because we've been conditioned to think that that is what thinking is that the more books we read, the more knowledge that we consume, that the more intelligent we are and the greater we think, when it's really, again, like I said, just a conditioning. All that thing is just a condition. So we read a certain amount of books, we read a certain amount of literature or whatever, that just is going to condition us to have this one answer, because we've been conditioned by all this input, where the answers, and again, I've spoken many times that, you know, Steiner says there is no knowledge but clairvoyance. And the only way we can actually get to that clairvoyance is through meditation and seeking. So, and very few of us do that. I mean, I know that I'm not. I try. I mean, but to get to a place where you can actually spend time, you have to get quiet and still, and it takes time to actually develop that inner world.
Okay, so I'm
I'll
hearing.
tell you, a lot of what I'm saying didn't come from reading, it came from meditation.
You're breaking up, Isaac.
Oops.
Yeah.
Some bad cell phone reception.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead, Brian, while he's.
Okay. So what I'm hearing here is that it's not such a bad thing that even after I've read a book, I forget so much.
No, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
But I think as we talked about with Swedenborg, he said it's really up to our, I forget what that word was that Tamara was using quite a bit. Let me look here. Our disposition.
Oh
Right.
yeah, the disposition word, that was last week.
um, and again, and what Russell says here, right? He can then, so when electrical sensations act in unison with his conscious awareness of lights, which centers him in person, he can then recognize cause in the spirit. So as long as we recognize where this electrical sensing or reading or knowledge from books differs from spirit.
Mhm.
I mean, what we're reading is a book right now, right? And this is in contrast to what he's really saying, even, right? We are reading, but we're not, the reason that we're reading this is not to, worship Russell or take it as rote, right? As gospel. We are reading it to go on our own journey and to say, is this really what we believe? Do we believe that there is a source? I mean, what's the percentage of the world that believes that? And then do we really think that, as Steiner said, that there's only clairvoyance? Because I think, Giselle, you were posting something in the Telegram today about how history is so wrong and that we can't rely on the written, historical text. And so if there is the Akasha, as Blavatsky talked about, and the Akashic record, which records everything, would it not be better to seek that in meditation and silence, right? And knowing.
Well, there's many paths to this knowledge, and I believe reading, as long as it doesn't become a dead end, is a way of guiding yourself closer towards the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And my other comment was, a lot of what I'm saying now, it didn't come from books, it came from meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of validated and like breathed life into the words.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to meditation, these words didn't really, they were just fun theories.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing Vipassana, and suddenly I was like, oh wait, that's what it means, and it's not a fun theory, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So very much agree. And it's fine to forget stuff.
And the funny thing is that Brian actually witnessed me actually doing some of this weekend with somebody where it was really being manifest, as I was actually concentrating on source and getting the other person to actually focus on source, how they were actually being downloaded as I was talking to them. It was true.
Wow, that's cool.
That was really amazing.
Wow.
Didn't you think so, Brian?
Yeah, it was so amazing that I wasn't understanding everything that was going on.
Okay.
But I was there. I just kept sticking around. Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Nice.
And so I think that, this can be used to heal people and to bring them into a conscious awareness. And that's why, getting back to my very first comment of the day, right, which was, do I think people can recover from actions they've taken that I wouldn't do, right? Can they recover from that? And I believe they can if they have a spiritual awakening. If they actually recognize, as what Walter Russell says here, if they can, see cause in the spirit, then they can, anyone can recover from any illness or disease.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So any more, I think we're going to close up here because we're going to start chapter 11.
Yeah.
So is there any further discussion on the two questions that we talked about today?
I like the word unison there. Because when we feel like when we're in aligned, if you like, that's when we act well with the right laws of the universe, if you like. And our work is lasting, or So I just looking at that, you know, the act in unison, which centers the person, and then you'll you'll be able to do something that will have a, well, I'll say good effect, but also won't have negative consequences,
Mhm.
you know, in align with, you know, in harmony, if you like.
Anybody else? No, nobody has anything else. I'd like to thank our new members for showing up, being so brave as to take on this topic and discuss these items. And been very, the more we can, as you said, Isaac, the more people that we can get to understand what thinking and knowing actually are, I think is going to benefit the entire planet and all peoples. So that's my goal, is to actually get people to understand this work, because a lot of people, I mean, I can't, I mean, without actually doing what I'm doing with the diagrams and the discussions and talking with people, I can't understand it either. So this really helps me, and I hope it helps everyone else. So again, we will meet next week. We will still be, well, we will be starting chapter 10, chapter 11,
Yeah.
called Electrical Awareness. That's pages 61 to 64 in the Secret of Light. And we'll discuss those. And I think we're still going to stay at 4:30. Jeremy, our other Jeremy never showed up. Jeremy Bidwell, is it?
Jeremy, yeah. Mhm.
Jeremy.
Middle.
Oh, yeah, we probably shouldn't say his last name, but so he didn't show up. So hopefully he'll show up next week, and we'll have some others that may show up. So that'll be great. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for coming. And I shall see everybody next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.